thank you. First, I have to say, and I don't want to go on about this too much because then you'll be like, oh, this is boring. But what a delight to spend the week with Dennis. And I just want to thank Dennis for working on this show with me, and also thank Brian Garcia, who was so integral in the whole installation, and everyone at the Galveston Art Center. It's like a big joy and honor to have a show here. It's such a beautiful space and such a specific space. You know, it has this kind of long reach, and so I wanted to do something that would, you know, the show brings together a lot of new work from the last year, but I also wanted to make something that would specifically respond to this space. So I would say, I don't want to speak too long, and there's so much work in the show, so I'll just kind of like talk about some broad themes, but I consider myself to be a painter, but a painter in kind of an expanded definition of that word, which, you know, oftentimes means paintings will extend into installations, involve 3D elements, and also performance and other time-based elements like the animations in the front and the video on the wall here. In terms of subject matter, I always start through the lens of my own experience. You know, I've always considered myself to be a figurative artist, and I specifically like to think about like looking back to the history of art, specifically like Western art, not like cowboy and Western art, but Western art with a capital W, and sort of thinking about how to use those traditions and genres, but shift them in ways that make more sense to like my life and my body. So in a lot of my paintings, I like to say that I like the men to be like lazy and sexy and just like ready to be looked at, and I like the women to be kind of like scrambling or like trying to get the hell out of the painting, or like they're busy. And most of the women in the paintings, they're oriented towards the earth, they're oriented towards the sky, but there's always a sense of sort of speculation and determination in terms of how their body relates to the space. In this show, when I was talking with Dennis about it, I envisioned something that would sort of be like an abstracted waterfall that would become a sort of a river through the space. And the current would be these bodies of women, which would shift in terms of how we read them based on where the viewer was positioned. So if you saw it from the side, it would be like they were floating on their back or potentially laying on the ground. But if you saw it entering the gallery, there would be a sense that they were sort of floating or ascending or descending, which could be sort of ethereal. I was also sort of thinking about that vintage game Space Invaders, where they, you know, move up and then are, you know, pull apart. The geometric forms almost become sort of like the boulders in the river, and as the figures hit them, they refract or pull apart, imposing a logic on the bodies that aren't necessarily their own. So sometimes those positions feel uncomfortable or complicated, much in the way I think it feels to be a woman living in Texas in terms of this time. And so, yeah, in addition to the paintings, I wanted to mention also another kind of shift or something I've been thinking about is shifting the relationship between the frame and the subject matter within the frame. So with these paintings, the frame actually becomes the dominant content, and the interior in the frame becomes kind of the neutral placeholder, sort of as a reverse of what we would think of as a relationship between painting and frame. So that was something I was thinking about. I've been looking at these amazing illuminated manuscripts where there's all this like weird, wonderful stuff happening in the marginalia, like things that complicate the text, complicate the images. And I was thinking a little bit about that, sort of how the things happening in the frames could make us reevaluate what was happening in the rest of the image. In terms of, this is the last thing I'll say, but in terms of the two videos, one of the videos, which is the one in this gallery, is called Drawing Battles. And that is actually an older piece. It was made in 2015. And for that piece, there's one of my sons, Paul. That was one of these pieces that was like a gift. You know we have work that kind of some work you sort of seek out, and some work sort of like taps you on the shoulder, you find it, or it finds you. And one day, my sons, at that time they were like 3 and 5, And they were doing this thing, and they were like fighting and drawing at the same time, and they were like, drawing battle. And it was like, and I'm like, that is so much better than anything I'm making in my studio. So I decided to embark on a series of videos that would be drawings that were also conversations and also expressed sort of power dynamics within a family. So my sister is in one of them, my brother is in one of them, my sons and my husband. And I was thinking, I've been reading a lot of this philosopher Merleau-Ponty, and one of the things that he talks about a lot, which I love, is this idea of spoken language versus speaking language, like spoken language being the thing that draws from our knowledge base, and speaking language being the thing that happens in the moment based on sense response, so that piece I think of as sort of like speaking language. And then finally, the funny, weird, surprising videos in the entry hall. Those are new pieces that I think of as sort of an ongoing kind of, almost like a diary. They're called warm-ups, and they're like impressions and observations and conversations that I started at a residency in 2021 and have just been kind of adding to. And we sort of went back and forth, like, should we include these? But I think it bubbles up sometimes, but humor is very important to my life and important to my work, and I felt like that added a certain dimension of my practice, so those are also included.
That was Joey Fauerso talking about her latest exhibition, I Wish I Had a River, on view at the Galveston Art Center from January 14th to April 16th, 2023. You can learn more about this exhibition and the Galveston Art Center at www.galvestonartcenter.org.